I'm
You're
here.
following me. Yeah, you're still with me.
I'm
Good
here.
job.
I'm
You're
here.
here.
So
Everybody else.
hopefully they are.
So imagine being able to stream things like Netflix or your favorite Marvel movie or your Disney Plus content, whatever it is, and know that everything that you're doing is completely done off of green energy, solar power. Another thing that we do in our space is we design the future around sustainability. And that's so important for everybody listening to understand and also to become inspired around. We just deployed the world's largest behind the meter solar plus battery capacity array that's ever been built. It's more than 500 megawatts of solar capacity, coupled with more than 800 megawatt hours of battery storage. This was Tesla's largest mega pack battery deployment ever to date. Hopefully they'll do more. We're encouraging it. And it is a utility size architecture that can power the city of San Francisco entirely off these batteries for 6 hours, power more than 100,000 homes, power hyperscale data centers, even when the sun sets. And if you're thinking, why is that so cool? This is the biggest problem with solar. Use it or lose it. No capacity capabilities whatsoever. Beyond traditional UPSs, these Tesla mega packs are coupled with our solar arrays that that we're working on with partners to revolutionize the way some of the most expansive, largest, power-hungry systems operate in our world. And if that's not exciting, I mean, you're literally creating a foundation that will disrupt how we consume power for some of the most critical architectures and infrastructures that we use today. There's your Pandoras, your streaming Netflixes, and everything else.
And this is super important in this part of the conversation. I feel like, again, I sometimes feel like an alien looking from the outside because I didn't grow up in this stuff. I didn't bathe in this stuff. I'm essentially a logistics and commodities guy. But now I specialize in sort of trying to understand as much as I can about the hardware and sort of how it goes upstream from there. And it feels like to me that there's almost like an inverse correlation to as technology becomes more abstracted, it becomes, you understand what's going on less and less and less, right? It just works, right? Whereas 10 years ago, you actually needed to understand a little bit more about technology than it just worked.
Yeah.
I feel like as it becomes more abstracted, we think less about what the technology is actually doing. The fact that it exists in the real world and then it eats energy, for example, like 9 out of 10 people are absolutely not thinking about that.
No, you're absolutely right.
At all. And it is a massive consumer of electricity. To bone up on this conversation a little bit, I did some digging. And it's in over 50, I believe, it's very close now, but over 50% of the energy consumption in the data center space globally is still effectively just burning stuff that used to be alive. It's like coal, oil, like think about that for a second.
Yeah.
The energy that's powering our most important, innovative technologies are still sucking dead liquids and burning them to fuel it. And I feel like the better our tech gets, the worse we are at thinking about that. More as a society. Technologists obviously understand the problem and they're trying to work on it like crazy, which is what that was the aha moment for me. Was really, I didn't understand how big the energy draw was and how much of it is on fossil fuels still globally.
I think there's a really interesting comparison just for everyone listening, just to really kind of sort of nail it home. The consumption in the data center industry is about the same as the entire airline industry. And let's say pre-COVID.
And think about how much headlining that gets. We're constantly
quite a bit.
Reading articles about this, right? All of the time, because it's right there. It's not abstracted.
So we're building these new systems, and everybody listening, if you haven't had a chance to Google what we're doing at Switch as far as these solar arrays, I want everyone to do this. I want everyone to deploy these battery packs on a utility scale, and I think they should as well. Right now, I don't mind being a proving ground. We don't mind being a proving ground to see how this stuff works, because that's exactly what a lot of our competitors and a lot of people in the industry are saying, like, oh my God, that's not like a little bit of capacity. That's an extraordinary amount of capacity for a lot. Is this really going to work? And we're like, first of all, we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be announcing it, and we wouldn't be partnering and spending $1.3 billion.
You wouldn't find you wouldn't find the finance.
No. Capital Dynamics is who we're working with for that, and they're like, we see the future in this, and so we're going to pump $1.3 billion into this to make it happen. Plus jobs. There's over 1,000 jobs in the community to build these things out to work on a future power grid ecosystem. This is the exciting part of it. And I think when it comes to energy consumption, as cool as it is to talk about solar, the future is much more about capturing and retaining that. The power of the sun, my goodness, to actually use it again once it sets. That is exceedingly exciting.
This is the business of IT. This couldn't happen if you couldn't make it work from a fiscal perspective, right? Like,
Nope.
you can't.
So
people want to be clean. They want to be clean all, they'll talk about it all day long. But if you can't make the numbers work,
You're right. You're right. So here's the other challenge, right? Economies of scale, right? We couldn't do this in a little pocket because you're right. This wouldn't be economical. But when you're talking about, again, this size, world's largest solar array, biggest battery capacity, you're all of a sudden talking about the economics of size, right? Scale. And so you're talking about a difference between 9 cents a kilowatt hour for that
traditional,
greener. Yeah.
that's traditional.
To less than 5.
Less than 5. That's amazing. That's
using
insane.
green solar energy. I think it's like 4.9. You can take a look at the press release to validate that. But you just think about that for a second. So we've finally created an architecture that can use the power of the sun, capture it and store it. So when it sets, you're not just flipping over to, let's call it like you would do dead animals, right? You're still using, I mean, and you know what? I need to stop there for a second. There's nothing wrong with clean diesel. There's nothing wrong with natural gas. I can still see applications of that right now. But the future is really revolving around us being able to use this awesome solar energy, these renewable resources, a lot more effectively than we simply have been. And so in this sense, right, we're building an architecture that can support that and sustain that. So from an economies of scale perspective, yeah, we are able to reduce the price that you pay for pure green solar energy, arguably for the first time ever, at a price point that's almost half of what you'd be paying traditionally. You're right. Yeah,
it's amazing.
We
and yeah,
can
no,
make the sun work for us.
Yeah, and I'm not chasing traditional energies as well. Although maybe we should on a couple of them like coal, but it's not. It is what it is. You have to have them for now. It's just that I find the juxtaposition of what technology is, in that you're powering your technologies with flammable dead things, is just that do these arguably, not to me but to some, terrible things to the environment. That juxtaposition is crazy, and certainly what you're doing is extremely important. How long is this rollout going to be? When does this thing launch?
Officially, we announced it's called Gigawatt 1 in Nevada. We started talking about it in 2018, but we needed to get those Tesla mega packs ready in order. We already have at least one of the sites up and running. There's a few other ones that we're going to be deploying over the next couple of years or so. But we're not talking like far off here. We're talking about fully functioning sites. The mega packs, the deal's already done. Those are going to be inbound. We're not talking long here. We certainly don't want to wait on this.
This is something that I didn't find in my research. Does this system also allow you to be able to tap in? And I might be crossing my signals on something else, but does this system put you in a position to be able to tap into purchasing energy at times when it's cheaper to do so because you can go off grid, or not?
So I think you're referencing a little bit more of like the auto bidding function of some of these advanced microgrids. So you're right. So microgrids and some of these other types of off-grid controllers, let's call them, because the controller is like your central brain of a grid environment. And what some of these more advanced controllers are capable of doing is auto bidding the energy that they're sourcing or putting out. So if there's a time when, for example, the energy that it's got stored up is less expensive than what the grid is putting out, then yes, it'll use it locally. And then in other cases, it can actually put energy back into the grid and become a revenue source. That's how some microgrids work. This is a little bit of a bigger utility scale behind the meter kind of an architecture, so it's going to operate differently. But to that extent, if you are looking up those Tesla mega packs, they can absolutely be used for microgrid technologies.
So I think that's where I read it. I saw it in the Wall Street Journal, and I was reading through that press release on the mega. I think that's where I saw it.
Yeah. So the mega packs, and again, I've done a bunch of research on microgrids, and believe it or not, California right now is very actively looking at them even more, obviously with the rolling blackouts. Great pieces of technology. I really started to get into more microgrids when there were stories on like NPR and like mainstream media talking about these power grids that can offload and offset really pretty drastic power requirements from traditional ecosystems. To your point, Yes, they can do that. They can intelligently source and then actually push back power into the grid to help become revenue sources for you too. So different than diesel generators that don't do that.
Now let's close the loop on this with Switch. So,
Mm-hmm.
so to me, Switch seems to be sort of bleeding edge. We're deploying into data centers all over the world all of the time, and it's an area of the space that I understand a little bit more about, just from sort of the technical hardware, how it's consuming energy, where it's consuming energy, why they're putting them in certain places, latencies. You've got certain data protection laws all over the world, so you've got that also constraining where you hold data and things like that. Where does what Switch is doing today and investing in forward looking sort of sources of energy or technologies in house, like you're talking about your robotics, you're talking about cooling. You mentioned your CEO, who seems to be extremely technical and holds loads of patents. When the rubber meets the road, what is Switch doing to press forward the sort of the business of the data center, and how is that going to affect sort of what's available in the couple of layers above that as people are building out networks and building out platforms to support their enterprises globally?
So Switch is as a unique organization. So we're a publicly traded organization.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is if you take a look at our description on NASDAQ or anywhere else, really, we're not listed as a REIT, right? We're not a real estate investment trust. We're not.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think, our competitors do a good job in what they specialize in and what they build and what they design. We're a technology company in its truest sense. And when I came to work for this organization, I actually initially didn't want to come to Switch because I thought it was just another data center company. I was proven wrong very quickly by the people and the technology and things that they invest into it. So Switch does things a little bit differently. They build the foundation of the digital future. And that sounds so marketing-y, by literally controlling and managing and delivering the foundation. Back, when Rob Roy was just starting the company, he did a lot of things right, and a lot of things came to him because he's a good dude and karma, favors the good.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just to give you an example, there's an interesting company called Enron. I'm not sure if you heard of Enron, but I've heard of Enron. And interestingly enough, they were going to get into the broadband business. And actually, they had a really interesting model. They were going to use similar formulas and mathematics of how they delivered energy equally to different parts of the world. They were going to use the same concepts on broadband. And so they convinced like 26 carriers to physically extend their fiber, not into California because no one would underwrite that, but into Las Vegas, Nevada. There's no zero instances, all that fun stuff. They built the building. They had people working there. They had the fiber extended properly. And then you know what happened to Enron.
Mm-hmm.
So our CEO at the time, he just came in there and he's just like, well, I'll place a bid on it. And he really didn't want all of it. And then they said, there's nobody else building on it. So do you want the whole thing? And so before you knew it, he was able to acquire this building with those physically extended carriers. And so all of a sudden, Switch wasn't only a technology company, it was also a company that had control over some telecommunications in a very, very core region and area. So the very long-winded way of answering your question, the architecture that we build, the locations of our data centers, we call them the 4 primes. They're in latency zones that are capable of addressing and reaching out to all 4 corners of the United States. I mean, we're able to hit California with less than 4 to 5 milliseconds, the East Coast extremely quickly from our Grand Rapids location and from our Atlanta locations, the Pacific Northwest from our Reno location. I mean, by having control of this telecommunications. So we have our own Switch Connect auditing cooperative. It's $6.7 trillion buying power of our own telecommunications capabilities that we're able to go back there and build the foundation, both the physical and how we connect and communicate. So it's not just all fun and marketing and, oh my God, look at how cool we are. We've got like these really interesting designs. There's a lot of foundational elements that truly are different than anybody else that's out there. I implore anybody to go to our website, see how our security systems are set up, see how we support things like cloud, how, our data centers are, literally prepared for things like pandemics. We have our own medical ecosystem. We have supplies and staff that can last 100 days, more than 100. I think it's 200 days actually. In case if there's an emergency, this organization is architecting a lot of what's happening in the future. I mean, again, everything from robotics to unmanned aerial managed systems to the way we deploy edge to actually underlying communication systems. We are an underlying piece of the way you guys, all of you, communicate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was going through the website and speaking to you previously about this business, the thing that impressed me most, and you don't see it very often. It does exist, but you don't see it very often. Is this willingness to be a first principles kind of business, where if just because something exists already doesn't mean that that's what you should buy and that that's how you
Mm-hmm.
should do it. And especially in areas of technical landscape where it's foundational, you don't
Mm-hmm.
see people sort of reimagining what could be now, because there's all these things that have existed from a legacy perspective. And the fact that you guys are managing from first principles at such a foundational layer of the infrastructure stack is really impressive to me.
You got to get started somewhere, Justin. And I found very quickly that our leader, Rob Roy, he actively tries to push the boundaries in a very positive way, obviously, of what we're doing in the technology space, and he challenges other leaders. One of our coined terms is, I want to take a second, I think I'm back in my shirt. It's truth in technology. Um, and again, this logo in itself, designed by Rob and our company, is karma, right? It's a karma wheel. Do good for the world, and the world will do good for you. And I don't think I've ever been at a company where that mentality is literally instilled in the DNA of every single person that's in this corporate environment. Where we strive for gender parity, where we got more than half of our executive team are women. We try to go after social equality. We try to make this world a better place, not just from a
Mm-hmm.
technology perspective, but just being better humans, man. That's
Right.
like the big thing. It's a different place. It's a special place.